Whenever I live in a place, I like to be a good citizen. I like to understand it. And so my understanding from having lived there is that a lot of the success in Koreatown, these small businesses, came from the influx of immigrants after the Korean War in the mid-20th century, and that recent Korean immigrants at the time to Los Angeles were supported by two community institutions. One was the local churches, and one was the small business banks. And these really came together where you had these churches that acted as small business incubators, where they had copy-paste business plans to help immigrants build new businesses.
This is the Angel Next Door podcast, where we will talk about all things angel investing, what it is, who does it, how do we find them, what does it mean to invest in an early stage company. If you have ever wondered how you can affect the change you want to see in the world, then tune in to learn more.
In this episode, I'm talking with Caitlyn Driehorst of Rightwise Wealth. After the company she worked for exited to JP Morgan, she had a decision to make: stay with the startup in an acqui-hire kind of situation working for JPM, or branch out on her own. You will hear about her decision, why she made it, and how she took her learnings to create a new way of looking at financial planning that can be much more approachable. We talk quite a bit about how to do good while doing well in many aspects of investing. Enjoy the show. Caitlyn, welcome to the Angel Next Door podcast. I'm excited to have you here today.
Awesome, Marcia. Thank you so much for having me.
So I'd love for you to tell our listeners a little bit about your background. I know you have some definite experience with investing and entrepreneurship, as you are an exited entrepreneur yourself. So maybe start out with a little background and how you got here.
Yeah, for sure. I think it was probably surprising to many people that I ended up working in financial services. First, I was raised by two parents who always had defined benefit plans and public service careers. And so there wasn't a lot of financial knowledge ambient there. My dad was in the military, mom's a school teacher. So I was born in Las Vegas. I lived in Oklahoma, California, Louisiana, Texas, Washington State, Virginia, and Maryland.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah. So I moved around a lot before going to college. And when I got to college, I'd really decided what I was going to study. And so I called my parents and I was like, guys, thank you so much for paying my private university tuition. I've decided that I'm going to use this investment and I'm going to major in Russian literature.
Oh my
You could just hear the pause on the other end of the line. Because don't worry, mom and dad. I'm going to double major. I'm also going to major in English literature. And so I think that there was a lot of just trust me on that one. But then I got to call my parents a couple of years later and confuse them even more once again, because I got to call and say, I got a job. And this was pretty close to the financial crisis. And they were like, really? Yeah. I was like, yes, I'm going to work for the Boston Consulting Group. And I'm going to specialize in providing strategy advice to financial services companies, especially hedge funds and asset managers. And my parents were really confused. So they've been generically supportive, but not entirely sure about the particulars now for many years. After a couple of years at BCG, I needed to come back home for a minute. I worked on the strategy team for MGM Resorts here in Las Vegas, my hometown. But I really missed financial services. So I did a pre-MBA internship at Asio and Venture Lab with Tara Dasani in Washington, D.C. And I really think that Tara is such an illustration of the power of female mentorships. Tara is a check-writing female VC herself. She actually just raised her own fund. And in running this externship program and working with people like me, she really works hands-on to bring women into specifically investment opportunities. And so I got to work there for 6 months, went to Berkeley for my MBA, and then again got to work with an amazing group of women on the strategy team for Capital Group American Funds, which flies under the radar, but it's pretty big. They have more than $2 trillion in mutual fund assets.
Wow.
Huge. Definitely one of the sayings at Capital Group, we achieve omnipresent distribution. So possibly one of the best places to learn about every single nook and cranny of the financial advisor world. I loved the industry. I loved the people. I loved many things, but it was a little old fashioned. And at Berkeley and at Venture Lab, I'd gotten the taste for startups. So I took a role at OpenInvest, which was a Y Combinator and Andreessen Horowitz backed startup, completely different from American Funds, Capital Group. And I actually got the role by just cold emailing the CEO. I had read on TechCrunch that they had pivoted from working with retail customers, retail investors, to selling through financial advisors. And I shot him a note and I was like, hey, I heard you pivoted to financial advisors. I went through your website. I don't see anyone who has a background with financial advisors. I think you should hire me. And he was like, yeah. And so that was my first introduction to how startups work, which is if you identify a problem and you announce that you'll just run for the ball, people are like, yeah, sure, go for it.
Exactly. Yes.
I was only there for 11 months. The company was acquired by JP Morgan, and what I think was a very exciting acquisition. And for me, it was really life-changing to have it wasn't the type of windfalls that I've seen now as a financial advisor. I've seen some clients realize. I would say this was more a don't be worried about your student loans anymore exit than your grandchildren will play lacrosse exit, at least for me. But for me, coming from my dad, who was a veteran, and my mom was an elementary school teacher, I did have a lot of student loans. And with then that flexibility, I think I want to start a company. And so I didn't do it immediately. I started working on nights and weekends, building my pitch deck. But then, I moved from Los Angeles back home here to Las Vegas to be close to family, to support the business. And that's what I've been doing since 22.
Wow. So OpenInvest, tell us exactly what they did before JPM acquired them.
Yeah. And you'll have to forgive me. My joke about my dad is that he's a great guy who's just waiting for Stalingrad to come up naturally in conversation. And I've definitely inherited some of his proclivities. I can go way too long on investing topics. But what I think is really exciting about what OpenInvest was working on is something called direct indexing. And so you have the world of mutual funds and ETFs. And so these are what we would call pooled vehicles, right? So if you want exposure to big companies that are growing fast, you can buy one ETF or one mutual fund, and you can buy a basket of those companies that are all along those themes, right? And especially in a world where computers are bad, that's super convenient. But of course, computers are significantly better now than they used to be. It's much easier to hold a larger number of positions in a portfolio. And so rather than buying that basket of companies inside one fund, what direct indexing lets you do is buy all of the individual tickers, each of them individually. And when you do that, that unlocks a lot of really tax smart opportunities and a lot of customization. And so two people that's really exciting for, one is people who are values-based investors who want to drop out certain stocks based on their values criteria. And then also people who have highly appreciated positions, especially stock compensation, where it may not make sense for them to sell out of those positions, but they still want to replicate an index and control their total risk. That question of concentration, actually, Marcia, I know you work so much with angel investors. Angel investors can often end up with really concentrated portfolios. And so whenever we hear concentrated portfolios, the saying is wealth is created by concentration and preserved by diversification. As a financial advisor, we're always excited for any way that we can help clients do that in a tax smart way.
Built by concentration and preserved by diversification.
Yeah, I stole that from my friend Harry Raghavan, who's a big angel investor. Yeah, wealth is created by concentration and preserved by diversification. And we see that whether clients work for public companies, whether people have had an exit, we as financial advisors, it's our job to be the boring voices. We're more about the preservation on that side.
And the concentration would be if you're like a founder or you're an angel investor and you're going in with big risk, but potentially big reward.
Yeah, exactly. So if you think your mom probably told you don't put all your eggs in one basket, right? In many cases, if you're an entrepreneur yourself, or if you're just someone who's made a big investment into a company, your eggs are all in one basket, or most of your eggs. And so if that basket does really well, if that basket is Stripe or a big high flyer, that basket can really take you to places that you will get to have some exciting phone calls to your mom and dad about. But there's many startups that go under. And so if you're really concentrated, that basket may not take you there.
That makes a lot of sense. So you're living in Las Vegas right now. You were in LA. Tell us a little bit about the different markets you've seen for entrepreneurship in places like that.
Yeah, like I said up at the top, I've lived in a lot of places. And one of my favorite things about moving a lot is that you get a taste not only for how things are now, but then also how they came to be. When you walk down the street, it's previous people's passion projects, right? And so as I was reading your book and reading about the power of community to support entrepreneurs, I first reflected on my 4.5 years living in Koreatown in LA, which left me not only with a long-term appreciation for banchan, but also the power of the Korean community in LA. I want to be really careful in how I tell a different community stories, but whenever I live in a place, I like to be a good citizen. I like to understand it. And so my understanding from having lived there is that a lot of the success in Koreatown, these small businesses, came from the influx of immigrants after the Korean War in the mid-20th century. And that recent Korean immigrants at the time to Los Angeles were supported by two community institutions. One was the local churches, and one was the small business banks. And these really came together where you had these churches that acted as small business incubators, where they had copy-paste business plans to help immigrants build new businesses. So I think convenience stores are one you would often see. But for example, my home in Koreatown, I lived right next to Bethel Locksmiths. And I have to imagine the history of that business is it came out of a church, Bethel, like locksmiths. And at the same time, within the immigrant community being a small and well-connected community, a lot of small business lending was able to happen based on community ties and people's personal credibility, their personal relationships. And so that helped these small businesses receive credit, whereas otherwise they wouldn't have been eligible under traditional underwriting criteria or, frankly, biases that were really common at the time. And so when you look at the success of the Korean small business community in LA, that entrepreneurship was really fostered by how the community came forward to sponsor these small businesses. Now I live in Las Vegas. I always like to caveat, I'm here for very wholesome reasons. My family's military. There's a huge military presence in Las Vegas. My siblings live here. My parents live here. And we live out in the burbs. I like to joke it's Phoenix, but with better restaurants. One thing I've noticed about the startup scene in Las Vegas, outside of the influence of Tony Hsieh, just the more ambient local community, we've had some really high profile bad actors. I look specifically, the Wall Street Journal recently profiled how startups that are bad actors can take advantage of equity crowdfunding platforms. And I was dismayed to see them profile a local player, which was a local startup that had used really hotshot social media videos and some exaggerated marketing language for some bad behavior by the entrepreneurs. And what I've seen in Las Vegas as I talk to fellow angels and business builders is because there can be bad actors in the community, people really want to pull away. People want to say, maybe I want my angel investing to be focused in San Francisco. We have a lot of California expats. Maybe I want to keep my angel investing on the coasts. I worry about bad actors locally. But again, I mentioned, even though I've lived in so many places, my dad always taught me to always be a citizen of wherever your feet are planted. What I really think as we think about communities and entrepreneurship, you need to lean in. If you're someone who values integrity, showing up in those communities, bringing light and bringing more values and more measures, a more measured approach in, can really behoove the community.
Yeah, those are two really good examples. We know many angels who live in Las Vegas, and we've definitely heard similar stories. All right, so let's fast forward a little bit. You are now starting your new company after you left or had that very successful exit to JP Morgan. And then did you end up having to work for JP Morgan at all in the process or no?
Oh, no. I thought about it very seriously. When you're at a startup that was acquired, and I should specify, I was only there for 11 months. The people who built the company had been there for many years. I was in a director level role. When a company gets acquired, you first get the upfront payment, which is your vested equity in the company. But also, big reason JP Morgan was buying the company is to retain the talent. That OpenInvest had some really has some incredible people working there, and JP Morgan wants them to be there. And so there can be a significant financial incentive for you to stay at a company over several years, and that retention money vests over several years. And for me, that was a much greater amount of money. And I thought very seriously about whether to take it. I did a lot of diligence. I talked to a lot of people about opportunities. And for me, ultimately, I walked away from the offer. And I think it was for a couple reasons. One, I would have needed to have either moved to New York or San Francisco. And I had started to feel that a personal value for me was going to be being closer to family, showing up for them, really being a more day-to-day part of their life. But another big part of it was, I mentioned this Russian literature degree. I always joke that the Russian literature degree is useless, when actually I think that it's a tremendous thing to have studied. Because if you spend a lot of time thinking about death, that reflects you spend a lot of time thinking about the meaning of life. And you only get so many years, right? And when I looked at the number of years it would take me to vest out that award, and that then different awards get layered on, I thought to myself, if I ever want to build my own company, there's only so many years that I could do that. And even if financially taking that award would have been the better opportunity, I really wanted to make the choice for the type of life I wanted to live, the type of impact I wanted my career to bring. And yeah, that entrepreneurship was really important to me. But yeah, that was a really hard decision.
I bet. But it sounds like you were extremely thoughtful in how you went about making the decision, which I think is amazing.
I think, I've talked about my family a good amount. My parents were never big on blue ribbons, right? I think it's the military. So my father is military, my grandfather and great-grandfather were all military. And my parents were very much more about, we never care if you're valedictorian. We don't care if you go to a top school. We don't care if you're financially successful. We care a lot that you're a good friend, that you're a good daughter, a good sister, a good wife, and that you give more than you take, and that you're curious and diligent. And I've always felt that was very freeing, that I never felt the points were something I needed to optimize for, that I could really be more thoughtful about the how rather than the what. Although my parents they're very proud of the business I'm building. Again, I don't know that they understand it, but they support it.
Yeah. So tell us more about RightWise. What made you decide how to build it? And then tell us a little bit why it's so different than other advisors out there.
Yeah. I went to the University of Chicago, and it's very funny to me that all of these girls I met when I was 17 were now all very impressive, right? And one of my friends is an attorney. And so I always call her when I need someone to look at a lease. One of my girlfriends works in strategy for a healthcare company. So whenever I have some question on why something didn't qualify for my deductible, and I just had a baby, so I have a lot of those questions right now, I can always call up that girlfriend. When I started working in this industry, I started being the friend that people would call up and they'd be like, hey, I'm looking for a financial advisor. Can you help me? And so I started being like, yeah, sure, I can do that. And when you're thinking about someone who's good enough for someone who held your hair back the night you first tried tequila, that's got to be a good financial advisor, right? I want someone who is not charging commissions. I want someone who has a real education in financial planning, right? Someone who has that financial planning focus, not just an investment focus for a younger accumulator customer. Someone who is objective on the investment products they recommend. Someone who doesn't have the conflict of an in-house product, however well managed that conflict may be. And Marcia, it was actually really difficult to find someone who was going to be good enough for my friends. And so that was the first moment when I was like, dang, when I think about all of the things that are progressive and ethical and the best that the profession can be, there's not as many firms pushing in that direction. So that was the first insight. And then the second insight was, again, coming out of conversations with my girlfriends. Yeah, we all used to be 17-year-olds. We all knew which exchange student was over 21 and could pick us up something for a party. Now we're all much older. And it's been crazy to me to hear my girlfriends who've worked so hard start to wonder whether they can maintain a full-time career. Something I'd hear a lot is, I live in a world where I can either work 50 hours a week or I can work 0 hours a week. And I don't know that I can. Or I'll hear things from girlfriends that are like, just makes sense that I'm the one who does the nanny pickup and the nanny drop off every day. And that means I can't take phone calls after 4:30. And so that means my husband's getting promoted and I'm not. And I was just like, man, it's crazy that these women are so qualified. And I'm like, they would be great financial advisors, or they'd be really great in this industry because it's an industry where you genuinely get to help people. Analytical horsepower is really important. It's very flexible, right? Because it's client service. You work around your client's availability. And so you can say, I don't work Tuesday mornings and I do work Sunday afternoons. That flexibility is really endemic to the profession. But Marcia, as I worked in the industry, you don't need to read the industry research reports to understand who is a financial advisor in America today. So according to Cerulli, only 18% of financial advisors are women. Only 11% of financial advisors are non-white. And the average age of a financial advisor is 55.
Wow.
So it is quite literally old white men helping other old white men get and stay rich. And so I was like, man, that's crazy that no one is trying to get out there and figure out how these women could build careers in financial advice. And so I started to wonder about, what if we bifurcated the client acquisition and the client service role, where I could have this ambassador program whereby people who have really strong community connections, people who are looking for something that's flexible, people are looking for something that they can really make their own, that can fit around other responsibilities, whether that's entrepreneurship, consulting, a portfolio career, life coaching, childcare, elder care, whatever. We can have that. And then I can have this financial advice piece, this very client service focused piece, distinct from the salesman focuses of a traditional financial advisor. And one thing I just found really interesting as I started to, you mentioned, I approach decisions slowly, methodically. I do a lot of research. I started asking industry connections, what do you think about this idea? Could I create this flexible career option for women where they share financial education, bring people to my firm? What do you think about it? I was surprised that talking to people in the industry, I'd hear things like, oh, Caitlyn, that's wonderful. What a great social enterprise. Or like, Caitlyn, like, what a wonderful financial inclusion play. And don't get me wrong, like, I love social enterprises, businesses that do good and do well. I was at Astion Venture Lab, which is a financial inclusion focused firm. But for me, it felt very powerful to be like, no, this is not a social enterprise. And we are not financial inclusion. Like, right. Working with high earning women who are very powerful, who are very educated, and we're creating opportunities for them and we're helping them plan their money. And I'm sorry, like, that's not financial inclusion when these people might make $300,000, $400,000 a year and still can't find a firm that will work with them well.
Wow. So then tell us a little bit about how it works once people are in the firm. So you have these ambassadors who help you get the clients to the firm, but then once they get there, what happens?
Yeah, absolutely. So our ambassadors, they share educational webinars, they provide direct referrals. Their only responsibility is helping people get to know us, right? They're the greeter at the door, they're the maitre d'. It's not their job to provide financial advice, and it's not their job to say whether someone should be a client. Our financial advisors, we turn down clients if we don't think that we can provide value in excess of our fee. We're fiduciaries, we have to. So the financial advisor brings us the client, and then from there, we work with our clients in a really financial planning focused role. So look, we do investing. My background is asset management. I listen to all the investing podcasts. I will talk with someone about their appreciated stock lots any day of the week. But we really believe that investing is just part of people's financial lives. So we also talk with them about their budget and cash flow. We check their paycheck withholding for their taxes. We check their insurance to understand their coverage, if they have the right types of coverage. Things like umbrella and disability really sneak up on people. We work with people to help organize their strategy for end of life, a will or a trust. I find especially for people with young children, understanding the significant financial complexity that a child brings, at the same time that you lose a lot of your personal bandwidth, having a financial advisor help you can be really helpful. So in addition to bringing that knowledge to bear, we also help people organize their to-do list. We'll get on Zoom calls and help people do the clicks to set up a 529 account. It's a really high-touch service that we hope lasts for a long time. We hope that we work with our clients over many years.
And is it fee-based or is it based on AUM, or how does that work?
Yeah, I love talking about our pricing. For one thing, something that bothers me about the financial advice industry is that people often don't love talking about their pricing. I'm surprised when I talk to people I know who have MBAs who think that their financial advisors at big firms work for them for free. I've never written him a check. So how is he getting paid? They are not working for you for free. They're charging you a lot of money.
A lot of money, yes.
And maybe it's money that they're earning, but you should know that you're paying it. So the way that we price our services is we have a flat fee that we charge monthly, and that covers our financial planning. And then we have a smaller basis point fee than the industry average. So for our first year of service, for a one-person household, it comes to $4,000 for the financial planning fee, billed monthly. For a two-person household, it's $5,000 for that first year, again, billed monthly. The rates go down on an annual basis in the second year. We just work so intensely with people that first year is a slightly higher charge.
Right.
And then for any money that we help people manage, it's an additional 50 basis points, so 0.5%. So I know that the model, it can feel a little baroque, but what I think is exciting to understand about what that allows is, first off, it means that we can take clients who have no money ready to invest outside their 401k today. Many financial advisors, they have something like a $500,000 minimum. That's because if they charge a percent of assets, they need to make sure that you are paying enough to cover the value of their time. Because we have that flat fee, we can work with someone at the beginning of their journey. But like I said, we want these to be long-term relationships. And so as someone does accumulate money, which we hope that they do, we hope that we work together and someone has more to invest. If someone comes to an advisor and they have $500,000 to invest, they pay one fee. Let's say they have an inheritance or an IPO. Now they bring that financial advisor another $500,000. If that financial advisor is charging that 1%, that financial advisor's fee will now double. You were paying that person $5,000 a year. Now you're paying them $10,000 a year. And look, it is absolutely more work to manage more money. I don't know that it's always twice as much work. So what I like about our model, where we have that flat fee and then a smaller basis point fee, is that over time, when someone has a much larger portfolio, we can say we actually are less than other opportunities, that we can provide a lot of value over time. So I like to think that means that we can work with someone at the very beginning and then all the way through their wealth accumulation journey.
Oh, that's great.
Like, what a financial advisor thing to say, the wealth accumulation journey. This industry has a lot of jargon. You should hear, Marcia, you should hear all the different ways we know how to not say death. There's so many euphemisms. My favorite one is, when do you achieve end of plan? We believe that you will achieve end of plan at age 90. As a language person, I really enjoy these nuances.
Yes, I will tell you, that's a tricky thing. We had to go through the whole estate planning thing and all the scenarios. What happens if something happens to you, to your husband, to the kids, all of you, blah, blah, blah. It's a lot. It's a lot to think about, but you need to think about it.
You absolutely have to. So I mentioned at the top of our call, I just had my first baby, right? So my son was born in December. And for a couple of years, I've been a financial advisor. I talk with couples a lot about, I'm not an attorney, but I help them come up with their strategies for end of life. And I understand that these conversations they're so emotional and they're so administrative. But I really thought, as my husband and I prepared for our own end of life discussions, because I own my own business, he has some complex assets, we worked with an attorney for some trusts. And I really thought, this is cool. We're going to breeze in, we're going to breeze out. I was really emotional.
Yeah.
Granted, some of it was the hormones. I'm sure. I don't normally eat this much peanut butter either. When it's your child, when it's thinking about what happened to you, it's so hard. And I think that gave me so much empathy for our clients. First off, how difficult these conversations are. Second, how it can really lead you to procrastinate because it's so difficult to confront the power of these conversations. And then third, the value of working with a human being. People ask me a lot, how do you think AI will affect the profession? I'm like, I welcome AI, where it's going to help give people answers on, am I eligible for a Roth contribution this year? Should my wife and I do married filing separately for her student loan forgiveness? Bring on the AI. But things like, what does it mean when we sit here and we talk about the fact that you may not want to trust your brother with your children if something were to happen with you, and everything that means for what you want out of life? It's great to have a human in those conversations.
Completely. So before I let you go, tell us a little bit about where you would like to see the company in 5 years.
Oh my gosh. I'm tremendously ambitious, right? I don't think I know many entrepreneurs who really aren't. For me, a guiding phrase through the business I've always said is hundreds of ambassadors, thousands of clients. I've worked closely and really very closely studied firms like Edward Jones, Primerica, but even the wirehouses. I look at it and I think we could do that. And I really think about that as part of our ambition. But when we just did our 2025 strategic planning. And so I was talking with our financial advisors. These are our ambitions for the business. But like I was saying earlier, how I think about ambition for myself is not only what I do, but how I do it. We similarly for our business, we're ambitious in the numbers that we want to hit, but we're also ambitious in the way we want to hit them. That we want to advance this type of flat fee planning in the industry, that we want to really push on how people think about ethics in held away assets, et cetera. That we really want to push on these types of practices, on who we serve, on how we serve them. An example earlier when I was quoting our pricing, we're very specific that we always say a 2-person household rather than saying a married couple or a 1-person household. We work with clients who have a variety of domestic relationships that really work for them, that may not be traditional. Thinking through those little details in the language that we use and the service that we provide. In 5 years, I hope that we're continuing to push on that front as well.
Yeah, that's great. Caitlyn, thanks so much for coming here today and talking to us everything about money, financial planning, angel investing, exits, more exits. That's what we really want in the world, more exits, right?
Amen. You let me talk about my business, but Marcia, I mentioned this at the top of the call. I really enjoyed your book.
Thank you. I did not pay her to say that.
No, I really enjoyed your book. I really enjoyed how thoughtful your book is, not only in how people can think about implementing angel advice and like why they should do it, but one thing I love how thoughtful you are in talking about risk. I find, because we work with women, not exclusively women, we work with all sorts of clients, but they do come up commonly as one would expect. Thinking about risk as a good thing and not shying away with it, right? I find like having a very calibrated approach. I find that people can have 2 reactions to risk. They can think that it's everything and they shouldn't invest where there's risk, and they can think it's nothing and they can blithely disregard all of its longer term implications. And so I think standing in the middle and saying risk is important, risk is something to approach thoughtfully, and risk is something to understand. I think your book has a really excellent treatment of that. And so I really enjoyed reading it.
Thanks, Caitlyn. And thanks for coming on the show today.
Absolutely.
Thanks for listening. To connect with me, visit my website at marciadawood.com. And please subscribe, follow, and leave a review. It helps the podcast get seen by more people. And remember, you can also find the Angel Next Door podcast on YouTube too. And if you're looking to learn more about investing in the changes you want to see in the world, sign up for Ann and Bill Payne's ACA Angel University classes. Go to theangelcapitalassociation.org, all one word, to find out the schedule. And classes are now available on demand. Many classes are offered, everything from angel investing basics, which include fundamentals, risk, due diligence, term sheets, valuations, returns and portfolio strategy, and even a class on group formation. There's even a deeper dive where you can get advanced classes, including capitalization tables, startup boards, and exit strategies. If you're not already a member of the Angel Capital Association, you can become one for a low price that will give you unparalleled access to discounts, free webinars with a huge archive of content, networking opportunities, and much more. We'd love to have you join us.
All content for this website is informational and not intended to serve as legal, tax, accounting, or investing advice. While Marcia, that's me, does serve on the SEC Small Business Capital Formation Advisory Committee, my views are my own and not the views of the SEC or my fellow colleagues on the committee. Our speakers and hosts are thoughtfully selected for their educational value, but their opinions are their own and do not necessarily represent the views of the host, me, or the Angel Capital Association, and neither specifically endorse the use of presenters' products or services. Listeners of the podcast should consult their own tax, investing, legal, or accounting advisors before making important financial decisions. All warranties, including accuracy, completeness, and suitability for specific purpose, are disclaimed.